All right, hello humans. Welcome to the Tech Humanist Show. Come on in, start gathering around the digital campfire. I am, of course, your host, Kate O'Neill. So let me hear from you. From those of you who are already online, I see some numbers starting to tick up here. So hello, say hello, tell me where you're joining in from. And I'll go ahead and start cluing you in. So today we're going to be talking a lot about ad technology, data and privacy, and other related topics. So start thinking of your questions now about those topics. And in fact, feel free to start asking those in the comments, even as you keep saying hello and checking in, which you should be doing. And that will help us answer as many questions and discuss as many of those comments as possible. So this, as you may know, is a multimedia format program, which means that as I'm speaking, it's being broadcast live, but it'll also live on as an archive on multiple channels, so people can always find it later. So hello to those of you in the future from those of us in the past. And also each episode gets turned into a podcast for the following week, so you can always find it that way as well. Each week we explore different facets of how data and technology shape the human experience. I hope you'll subscribe or follow wherever you're catching this so that you won't miss any new episodes, because they're all wonderful. As is today. Today's episode is going to be fantastic. So please do note that as a live show, we will do our best to vet those comments and questions in real time, but we might not get to all of them. Very much appreciate you being here though and chatting with us and just generally participating in the show and saying hi. So with that, I'm looking for those comments. Bring them in, folks. But meanwhile, I'm going to go ahead and introduce our guest. So today, we have the great privilege of talking with Anna Milicevic, who is an entrepreneur, media executive, and digital technology innovator. She is the co-founder and principal of Sparrow Advisers, a strategic consultancy helping marketers and C-suite executives navigate the data-driven AdTech and martech waters. A pioneer of digital data management and advertising, Anna was responsible for the development of the Demdex platform, which is now Adobe Audience Manager, from its early days through its successful acquisition and integration into the Adobe Digital Marketing Suite. Prior to starting Sparrow, she established Signal's global strategic consulting group and helped Fortune 500 customers adopt advanced and predictive analytics across their marketing, ad ops, and digital content business units at SAS. Her consulting portfolio includes working for the United Nations, executing initiatives in 50+ countries, and advising companies on go-to-market strategies all around the globe. So Anna is frequently quoted by media powerhouses like the Wall Street Journal and Business Insider, who in 2018 named her as one of 23 industry leaders working on fixing advertising, thank goodness. As well as industry trades like AdWeek, AdAge, Digiday, Marketing Magazine, AdExchanger, and Exchangewire. She's a sought-after speaker on topics of adtech, martech, innovation, customer experience, data management, and new frontiers of technology. So, audience, keep getting those questions ready for our outstanding guest. And with that, please welcome my friend, Anna Milicevic. Anna, you are live on the Tech Humanist Show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hello, hello. Thank you for having me. It's really a pleasure to be a guest here.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you. And I think that this is kind of like, this is one of those things I have a few friends that immediately popped into mind when I started doing this show as like, they've got to be guests on the show at some point, but I'm sort of like keeping you in reserve. All the wonderful friends that I know are just brilliant. And I'm like, I gotta use you sparingly because I know I'm gonna have so much fun with those conversations that I don't want the other ones to pale by comparison. But here you are. Well, hey, so, we've got a lot of stuff to dig into because I actually went through and to prepare for some notes for today, I had gone through your newsletter that you write weekly, right? Uh-oh, I think we've lost Anna just a second here, so we're gonna reconnect and hopefully we stay connected here with the live show. But it's nice that Anna's left us with a frame where she's smiling. We'll get her back on in just a second, though. See if we can't reconnect here. Sorry, bear with us, folks. Keep those comments and questions coming, though. Tell me where you're tuning in from. I want to see where folks are. Isn't it fun that Anna's freeze frame is of a smiling face? I love it. We can't seem to get back here. Let's try this one more time. Oh, darn internet connection. We're going to make this work.
There's
Wait.
Oh, I hear you again.
Oh,
Okay.
there we go. Yay! I was like really sweating that one out. But Anna, I don't know if you could hear me say that the frame you froze on was you smiling. So it was really nice. It was like I didn't even know you were gone for a second because I was just like, oh, she's just smiling.
Oh no. I hope I'm back to moving and that whatever that internet god hiccup was is gone. But who knows?
Well, so I was about to, okay, Mark Barnhart says, glitches happen, part of the fun of live. So true, so true. It is part of the fun of this, is that, you know, you never know what's going to happen, and you got to keep things going. No, we've lost Anna again. Let's get this reconnected. Oh, something horrible is happening with our internet connection today. All right, but thanks for commenting, Mark. I know there's a bunch more people out there, so we need to get folks chatting to keep us going while we get Anna reconnected here. Wait, I saw a movement.
Wow, Kate, I don't know how to
movement.
describe what's happening right now other than I'm going to have to actually take a photo with my phone and send it to you over Twitter because it is just ridiculous. And if you all can hear me, I did start by saying that I've experienced every sort of weird technical glitch today. So obviously there's some kind of crazy cloud.
Yeah. I think oh, you were breaking up there again. Gosh, it's so crazy. Are you, sorry for the administrative stuff, folks. Are you hardwired in, by the way, or is there a possibility of getting Etherneted in?
No, unfortunately, that's the thing that I really can't do. I don't have an Ethernet line, so I'm hoping this improves itself pretty shortly. But if you can see my what this looks like from my perspective right now, my screen has literally just gone all pixelated and dark.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Well, you look fine and you sound fine. Everything's great as far as we're concerned right now. So let's see if we can just plow right ahead. Sorry for your pixelated view of the world, but you know, that's kind of a fitting way to go about this conversation.
I agree.
Well, hey, so you know, I want to dig right in. I was saying, I think when the connection dropped first, that and to prepare for this conversation, I had actually gone back and looked at your newsletters that you've written. So you have this weekly. Is it weekly?
Yes, it's mostly weekly.
Mostly
so far
weekly.
Since we started it. It's been.
Oh no, we're frozen again. All right, it'll come back. I'm sure it will. I'll just keep saying what Anna is saying here, which is that it's a weekly connection. Or sorry, weekly newsletter called Sparrow One. Everybody should subscribe to it because if you don't get a chance to hear Anna's brilliance without this many interruptions, then you deserve to treat yourself to the uninterrupted genius of Anna here. Georgia O'Neill, which is my mom. Hi, Mom. Says technology is not always helpful. You know, it's kind of funny that's in a way that's a little bit the underlying theme of the show. We want technology to be helpful. We want it to be helpful to humans and to help us connect with each other and have meaningful experiences. But what it's really, I think what the most helpful thing that's happening with technology is that it's forcing us to be very clever. Because like right now we just lost Anna completely. Let's see if we can bring her back. Mark says, I was a guest on a show.
Is currently unavailable.
Oh no.
Please leave a message after.
Mark says, I was on a guest on a show some years ago with the tech gremlins. That day rendered the entire interview unusable. It's awkward both for the host and for me. Mark, sorry you had that experience. It's rough when these things are really not working. This is episode 13 of this show, so this is kind of a bad omen, probably. All right, I'm gonna try Anna one more time here and see if we can't get her reconnected. Episode 13. What do you think, guys? Comment and tell me if you're superstitious about things like the number 13. Who's superstitious out there? Well, let me tell you a little bit about Anna's work. Well, I'm sure she's trying desperately and sweating it out trying to get back on the show. Let me tell you a little bit about what she's doing with this Sparrow 1 newsletter that I was starting to tell you about. She's been covering a lot of topics related to how data informs ad models, advertising. And one quote from one of her newsletters was, "We've previously explored how today's big tech should really be thought of as big advertising, since today's platforms owe significant portions of their revenue to advertising." So it's a really interesting observation, like the idea that what we think of as big tech, functionally, is really all about advertising, and it should be approached that way. Hey, here she comes. Let's see if we can get this show rocking and rolling one more time. There she is.
Well, that was fun. Hi, everybody. I'm back. Who knows for how long?
It's okay. I was just telling everybody while you were away, Anna, that this is episode 13. So I'm wondering if we've run into the gremlins are hitting us with superstition now.
Indeed.
All right.
That explains everything. I'm not worried now.
Yeah. My mom says yay.
Hi.
I want to go ahead and move into some of the discussion so we can actually get some of your genius captured here. One question I had for you almost like right away is there's this old chestnut. By the way, I was talking about, while you were gone, about the whole big tech should be thought of as big advertising observation that you made in one of your newsletters. Mm-hmm. And it feels to me like one of the other really commonly cited cliches is that if you're not paying for the product, you are the product. And that feels like it's been around as an observation for at least a decade, maybe even longer. But that it's not a very contemporary observation about the relationship between, humans and data and technology. Feels like things have gotten more complicated in the decade since that became popular. So I wondered if you see that way as well, and if you have a new mental framework, an updated mental framework that we can replace that with.
Yeah, I think that, for the better part of certainly the last decade, but really the last 2 decades since we've had digital advertising and the internet that's been becoming an ever-increasing part of our lives, we've kind of answered every question on, well, how am I going to monetize, fill in the blank, whatever service, product, whatever this is that we're talking about. The answer that came to mind always was, well, we'll just, run some advertising against it, or we'll monetize through ads. And so we've been kind of postponing this decision on what should monetization look like in a mature internet as opposed to an emerging internet. And, that's kind of what we're hitting now is that wall of continuously bad decisions and postponing the decision of what monetization should look like. And I think for the consumer, this is certainly coalescing now as a challenge where we're being asked to directly support some content creators whose content we're used to consuming for free. So this is every journalism conversation that we have today ties back to this. And, it's a really silly conversation to have. When we used to consume journalism through print journalism, nobody thought twice about paying for a single issue of a newspaper. But right now, if you ask somebody, hey, I want $4 for you to be able to read all of this amazing reporting today, that seems like, folks will balk at that. Mm-hmm. And go like, oh, that's too much to have that. So there's a mismatch between where we are with monetization, which is still, to your point, very advertising oriented, the perception of value on the user end of this advertising supported ecosystem. And then we're just starting to nip at the bud of what some future monetization models may look like. But we haven't really settled on one or several that will look like they're taking off. So we're in that exciting in between where anything's possible, but at the same time, nothing seems to work anymore. At least the market is really fluctuating space. So I don't know that there is a good mental model to transition to, other than as consumers, we really need to be more aware of the trade-offs we're making daily. And this is where awareness it'll.
Yeah, so one of the phrases I use frequently in my work is analytics are people. And it seems like, what I'm trying to get across there is that so much of the data-driven landscape of decision-making is based on the data trail that's generated from human behavior and human preferences and, all of the human communications and relationships as they transact in online and increasingly in offline spaces too. And, one of the things that I wonder about when you're talking about the shift or the growing awareness that, what has been happening with the internet of the last 20 years is an increasing reliance on ad-based models, and that is happening in parallel with the diminishing consumer expectation that they have to pay for subscriptions or anything like that, and the lack of viability, it seems, in many other monetization models. So, what are some of the ways that we can think about some of the emerging opportunities there? Like, what are some of the monetization models that we might experiment with? Of course, subscriptions are one that comes to mind, and freemium sorts of models and things like that. What are you seeing that seems innovative and exciting that anyone's out there playing with or trying to get some consumer awareness of?
I think one of the areas that I'm personally really excited about is premium VOD. So we have the pandemic to thank for a pretty big shift in how we consume entertainment, and really predominantly premium entertainment. So we largely don't have live concerts anymore. We're definitely not going to movie theaters, but still there's a slate of really content that needs to be still monetized that way. And so I look at releases like Universal's Trolls, or now the ever postponing slate of really exciting movies that I'm sure a lot of us would pay a lot of money to be able to see this year, like the James Bond film, Christopher Nolan's Tenet, another really high ticket item that has a lot of built-in fans already. But at the same time, the studios that are running them just don't have the agility to be able to shift into this more on-demand, direct-to-consumer entertainment universe. So I'm fascinated by the impact that the past 6, 7, 8 months are going to have long-term on sports, entertainment, esports, and these emerging ways of how we spend our time. Because as with most things, the trends that would have taken 5 to 10 years to play out are now actually being condensed in 18 months to 3 years. And it's just like, being able to witness almost a big bang of sorts in changes. And so I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, and one of the other examples seems like it's, and you wrote about it, is Hamilton being released on Disney+. And so that whole enthusiasm that generated around a relatively new streaming platform, and kind of garnering the opportunity for people to explore the catalog that they had, which I didn't know until we had access to Disney Plus, that they had National Geographic and they had Marvel, and so all these other things had somehow escaped my notice. So there's a really interesting lesson there, I think, about kind of the exposing the opportunity to consumers and making sure that there's choice and that there's breadth of opportunity. What do you see happening there that's in parallel? I guess I want to add into that question too. This is all happening, as you say, at a time through the pandemic where we're also seeing this tremendous growth in e-commerce and the downtick in the closures of brick and mortar and things like that. So there's just so much upheaval in so many industries as a result of the pandemic. I guess I don't know exactly how I'm formulating that question, and actually I'm not sure that I think you have frozen again. Oh no. Are you there? You're there. You're moving.
Oh no, just as you started, yes. No, just as you started saying, and I guess I want to dovetail the next question, so I didn't hear any of that part.
That's okay. I think I butchered the question, so we're it's just back to Hamilton. Let's just go back to Hamilton.
But yeah, I think we see a lot of traditional companies, whether they're traditional brands or traditional entertainment. Sorry, I'm so sorry. This is awful. I think it's my internet that's tanking.
Oh, I'm
but
sorry,
yeah, so you're
happening.
saying about Hamilton. I think yeah, sorry everybody. I hope this is still fun. Yeah, so you were saying about Hamilton, and what I liked about that that approach was that Disney uniquely understood that to be relevant in this direct-to-consumer world, you also have to approach awareness and consumer acquisition differently. And in a world of content abundance, where there is so much good content out there, it's usually not about a single piece of content that will drive somebody to subscribe, but you can use it the way Disney has used Hamilton to really, to your point, let folks experience and kind of talk themselves into continuing to pay for the service and really exposing the value of the service. And this is the number one mistake we see a lot of traditional companies make and not really understand how to pitch to a digital first, mobile first consumer or a direct subscriber. They're just not wired to do it that way. And oftentimes the technology stacks that they have in place just aren't the types of tools that can facilitate this type of direct interaction as well. So they're stuck in this very strange limbo where they are committed to continuing to acquire customers in traditional ways, but that's just not how you would go about acquiring a direct customer that you now want to go and acquire.
Yeah, and your point about the difference between acquisition and retention, these are concepts that are completely familiar to any marketer, but I think the more that you think about how that plays out in an increasingly humanistic way, like making sure that we're thinking holistically about human experience as opposed to manipulatively, because I think as we'll get further into the discussion about the conversation that would have happened 20 years ago when I was at Netflix about retention and using customer data to offer sweeter deals and keep people around is a potentially very different conversation than what can happen now, 20 years later, with not necessarily with Netflix, although with Netflix, with any company, and the level of granularity of data that's available, the level of connected insights that can come from different data sources. So it becomes a very different kind of conversation, and it's one that leads, I think, into the larger conversation of privacy, and you've written about privacy quite a few times. You've said we're having the wrong conversation about privacy. What do you mean by that? Uh-oh.
Yes.
There you are. Okay.
When you say it means something nice to have, like I hear privacy, and it's fluffy and great, but ultimately not something that is a must-have. And that's my ongoing frustration with privacy-related conversations, because I like to think of it in terms of data usage rights rather than privacy. Because I, as a consumer and the creator of this data stream that everybody but me, the data-driven ecosystem, is actually able to monetize, I want to have more control over used with what is being done with my data, and I certainly want more transparency. And when we couch it in the language of privacy, that usually tends to be interpreted in a very binary way. It's like, oh, leave me alone, I don't want to be tracked. And that's not where most consumers are. Most consumers understand that companies want to market to them, but then, why isn't someone like Target giving you $20 to go and try out a service or something like that? They certainly have the budgets for that. Maybe there's a shortcut way that we can bring consumers closer to companies that want to talk to them, and we don't have to do this big rigmarole and track and infer and whatnot. And that's really what's missing now. We have the technology that would make that happen, but the business processes and the thinking hasn't really caught up. And I cringe at privacy restrictions being imposed in this ecosystem without actually having the conversation around value and who is the creator of these ultimately very valuable data sets, and who is actually seeing any value extracted from them. Because right now consumers are seeing very, very little value from the very exhaustive data sets that they're generating.
Yeah, it seems like it requires there be an awful lot more education and sophistication in the consumer space, but also even just among practitioners, thinking about the broad applications that some of these data sets can have. So you had a great example in one of your newsletters about if you just look at your Google interests settings, and you went through and did kind of an inventory of like, some of yours were like Microsoft PowerPoint, like, yeah, okay, but yeah. Fair play, right? Like,
yeah, I guess that's an interest, sure.
Yeah, sure. You had Portugal national football team?
Yes, I have no idea. I literally could not figure out how that made its way there.
But knitting, you said, made sense. You do.
Yes.
Knit. Okay.
I did. Yes. So that's the one that was like, oh, okay, this is kind of maybe me, but I could not Sherlock Holmes my way back from the Portuguese national football team. I keep racking my brain around like what was I searching for that could have triggered that kind of conjecture. And obviously that's a really ludicrously silly example, but these kinds of assumptions are being made with much more relevant data sets. So let's say I hear about a chronic condition somehow, or maybe through, somebody has it in my vicinity, and I Google it, and I can very easily be classified, unbeknownst to me, in some sort of segment, are likely to suffer from this disease. And then what happens when a health insurer purchases an alternative data set and uses that to, determine price of my coverage, or a life insurer uses it to deny me life insurance? Even though this could be a completely inaccurate data set, the power of propagation can completely ignore the fact that its source isn't true. And so things like that literally keep me up at night. And this, again, going back to the privacy conversation, this is at the crux of it. It's not, oh, privacy. It's if you're going to be using these kinds of data sets, then you have to give people the direct ability to control what's being used for all sorts of various inferences about their lives.
So what kind of control does that look like? Or how, what kinds of interfaces or control sets could we expect, or could we imagine that consumers might have?
So I think I'm going to invite the ire of the internet now if I say, well, this is one possible application of blockchain here. But so please, don't everybody laugh at once. It is actually but I do see almost like a marketplace where, different companies are saying, hey, we want to target you, or we want this particular data set about you, and that you as a consumer can say yes, no, I never want to hear from you people again, ever. Don't ever mail me or email me or anything. I don't exist for you. And obviously it's easy to imagine something like that. And I think it's easy to understand the potential utility of it, it's very difficult to build. And that's what we want to see in market, but it's near impossible to build it now with the data infrastructure that we have.
Yeah, that was amazing that you said that, and then your video had frozen up, so it was like your mouth was perfectly still, but we could still hear you.
Oh no, you're frozen.
But we're are you frozen? Am I frozen for you? Oh my gosh. Those of you who are hanging on, and I do see some folks hanging on, and I really appreciate it. So sorry that we've got all of these issues going on. We're going to try to make it as useful and entertaining a conversation as we can for those of you who are hanging in. I want to know...
start texting you if it's...
yeah, maybe just text me your answers and I'll just put them up. I've been noticing that you have been following the TikTok song and dance is what I would call it. So first of all, what do you make of the data and privacy issues that are related to Chinese ownership of an app used so widely by American and international audiences, and what does that even say about kind of the expectations that of who's going to own platforms and that people are going to be using?
I think that whole story is particularly interesting because it's really the first time that we are seeing the internet that originated in Silicon Valley mostly and the internet that originates in China interacting with one another. I think, for me, it goes back to we need to have scrutiny over what any app does with our data. And so it can't just be, oh, you TikTok, you are somehow foreign owned and, you are inherently evil. And I think, I remember the conversations that you initiated around all of those apps that were comparing like faces and like aging faces and stuff like that, many of which were not housed in the US. And so, asking what happens to this data set, especially if it's a potentially biometric data set, is really, really important. But as we saw with TikTok, it can't just be in the interest of freaking everybody out and, mentioning things like national security without really the context around it, because even if you're making a valid point, it just sounds stupid to try to make that argument without actually expanding it to include all data operations. So that was my most of my reactions around that whole spectacular mess were around, oh, this is a great opportunity to talk about data rights usage. Let's talk about that. And instead, it just kind of spiraled into this very, very strange scenario and much ado about nothing in the end. So, yeah.
Kind of feels like it's a very contemporary story that, we always see things become reduced to their least sophisticated talking points, and then it just gets hammered in these kind of ideological arguments and vacuums. But, I wonder, what are you thinking now about, the American potential investment or a holding of the app? Like, I know you had included a chart that showed this complicated ownership structure that some journalist had included in his tweet, and that it lives on the ByteDance site, I believe. It very explicitly and transparently explains the hierarchy of these holding companies and the limitation of the U.S. component of the TikTok discussion. So are we even talking about anything of significance anyway?
No, not at all. And that's the thing. It's a missed opportunity, and a lot of hullabaloo over essentially nothing. We don't get words like national security involved in regular discussions around like who owns cloud infrastructure here or there. And so it's once again, we're supposedly having a conversation, but we're not having the conversation that we should be having. And so, pick any topic from the digital world, and I think that generalization will apply. And I really mostly see it as a missed opportunity to clarify and educate consumers who are not thinking twice about installing something on their phones, about what can potentially happen from that point on, and what the data exhaust that they're generating just by using their device actually looks like. I think that's something that's incredibly important from just a technological literacy perspective.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's the three-pronged discussion that I inevitably have when this kind of subject comes up, is that there's a corporate responsibility piece, there's a government responsibility piece, and there's an individual responsibility piece. And that piece, I think, is the easiest to overlook. But each of us, all people, need to be becoming more savvy and sophisticated all the time about the data footprint that we leave and the way that we engage with different systems. So we've got that. Like, we know that needs to happen. What do you think needs to happen on the government responsibility side? Let's segue a little bit into regulations. What do you see as a missed opportunity or an opportunity in the area of regulations around personal data?
Well, first of all, I love that three-pronged approach, because I would venture to say that really the only companies that seem to be operating where they should be right now that is the corporate prong, and that's inherently because whoever owns the most data in a big data environment has a really, really big moat over others. So this is where the big tech conversation really becomes particularly impactful, and you can see the advantage that somebody like a Google has with really understanding where everybody is and what they're doing at any time of day, essentially. I think when I look at regulation, again, especially here in the US, I see a lot of reactiveness and a lot of, skating way behind the puck, to borrow from Wayne Gretzky, and, solving problems from several years ago. And the rate of advantage of big data agglomeration and aggressive acquisitions, and that big tech is adopting as a growth strategy, it just doesn't leave room for you to even be 6 months behind, let alone 3 to 5 years. And so unless we have this type of consumer data protection environment, I look at things like GDPR as an inspiration and a way to adopt something that can be significantly improved upon in actual implementation, but like a good first step. Unless we have that layer that's really consumer friendly, we're always, always, always going to be way behind big tech on this. So it's no longer a tri-pronged approach. You have, one prong that's very strong, and then two that are kind of not really doing very well, and that does not look very balanced. And I hope that is going to change as we get more regulators and legislators who are more attuned to the tech landscape in general and are more tech savvy. I don't think we can afford more regulators who are, endlessly fascinated by how search works in the year 2020. That's just not acceptable. And so we need to level up on that front. When I say we, I largely mean the US, but this will stand for most other countries, although amongst the OECD group, we are doing quite badly when it comes to this type of maturity in regulation and really consumer protection.
Yeah, and the opportunity seems like there are so many other kinds of entities that are proposing their own or coming up with their own types of regulations, like the Amsterdam Algorithmic Index, or whatever they're calling it, the register of algorithms in Amsterdam. Or is it Amsterdam, or is it in the Netherlands as a whole? I can't recall. I don't know if you remember. But that seems like, there's this opportunity to have algorithmic transparency and make seemingly black box algorithms more approachable to everyone and create accountability. Like, what opportunities do you think exist around that space right now?
I think we talk about algorithms so much, but we talk about them as if they're some like magical entity and like mystical power that does something and whatnot. And it's not. It's we human programmers put in inputs and put in constraints and reflect their perspective in the world, and then machine language interprets that and channels that back to us. And I just want everybody who has said that something along the lines of, well, the algorithm does this, is just to replace that with, the people who programmed this algorithm have done so and so, because I think it really removes responsibility from us as authors of these technology solutions. And technology is still very homogenous. The people who get to build it overwhelmingly across the world look a certain way and come from a certain background and think very similarly to one another. And unless we can figure out how to democratize this so that everyone is truly involved, we're always going to have an inherent bias reflected in the algorithms, even if the authors of software have the most noble intentions ever. It's just by design, that's how this works. So I'm particularly excited about things like the no-code movement and really removing the level of knowledge one needs to have to even play in the arena of developing and having a stake in technology. And I think that that's going to be the next where I get excited about the interaction and intersection of humanity and technology. It's around things like that. Like I want to have my 4-year-old niece should be able to program a bunch of stuff by drawing or using the tools that she normally has. I don't want to live in a world where she needs to learn 8 specific languages and go to school for 20 years to be able to like interact with a machine like that. I can say that because that was my path. I have a computer science and math degree. I've done all of that, and I don't want that. I don't think we have to live in that kind of world. We can unlock a much better, more equitable world for everyone. And that's what I'd really like to see as the next phase here.
That's beautiful.
I was going to say, I don't know if that actually answered your question.
Oh, well, I think it's a great answer, whether it answered that specific question or not. I want to know what, so that feels like a very optimistic view of, what can happen. I want to know what else you are optimistic about when it comes to how technology can shape human experiences, or what we can do with data and emerging technology to improve the meaningful experiences of humans in the future.
Yeah, I want to say this has been a very trying year for optimism, especially technological optimism, because we readily see that there are solutions available that we're just not using or not using well. I'm greatly energized by not having this Silicon Valley be the only place in the world where we innovate something in technology anymore. I think that there are so many interesting initiatives, and the cost of participation has kind of lowered itself significantly, that now kids in the most remote areas of the world can start building cool stuff on their mobile phones, can start building businesses just by using chat apps and similar. And that's just been really, really wonderful to see. I think we here in the West and OECD countries can learn a lot from these new approaches and really new creativity bubbling up. So I tend to think a lot about how can we elevate really cool creative projects that aren't originating here. How can we find vehicles to fund them and to support them commercially? And I like to think that in 10 years time, just looking at how much things have changed, never mind the world, but in like the New York tech ecosystem in a decade, and then extrapolating that to the entire world, like that's genuinely exciting to me. And I think the more we're innovating now, the closer we are to like bleeding edge between different spaces. So if you're good with data analysis, you can do that in you can apply that to biotech, and you can apply it to climate change, and you can apply it to logistics, and you can apply it across many different dimensions. So I think we're at the cusp of going from that very specialized look at our careers and our individual focus on a very like factory driven kind of way, like, oh, I work on this particular part and I'm very good at this, but I don't know anything about any other parts of the card that I'm putting together, to a much more renaissance approach to knowledge, where you'll have, the kind of the building blocks and the critical knowledge that you'll need to command, whether that's high math literacy, analytical skills, ability to process a lot of data and extract value from it, similar, that can be applied across many, many different things. And every time in the history of humanity, when we've had that kind of blending event, something magical has come out on the other end. So that's my that's where I couch my optimism now, is that I think we're in that kind of acceleration phase, and that could be really, really wonderful in the next decade.
Yeah, that's a great way to think of it. I do have a question from the audience. Shauna Karp asks a question: does the math background of a lot of algorithms create problems around abstracting into no code?
It shouldn't. We shouldn't be creating barriers. We should be finding ways to explain complex math to people who don't speak complex math. And so you mentioned knitting. This has been one of the big revelations for me in the last couple of years, and one of the reasons why I picked this up as a hobby. So, my grandmother was a great crafter, and she many, many years ago tried to teach me how to knit, and I was like, this is not interesting, whatever. Until literally last year, when I looked at a knitting pattern, and I just had this revelation that, oh my God, this is code. Because it is code. It's exactly that. It's an abstraction. You need to visualize, and then you need to make and translate what you're seeing on a piece of paper or on screen or something like that. And I thought, some of the first programmers, the computers, were women, for an obvious reason, because we had the skill set based on generations of crafting and telling stories in this level of abstraction. So somewhere between that first step and the world we live in today, somebody inserted this, oh no, it's all math thing in between, and didn't look at disciplines like crafting and knitting, and didn't have the skills to look at that and go, well, wait a minute, this is exactly what I'm looking for. So we had a completely different set of mental models shifted and put on top of this world. It doesn't have to be that way. So I think as mathematicians now, there is, mathematical research and furthering that, but I think we have a lot of opportunity to really demystify and think about math as, Lego building blocks, and create that universe so that more and more people don't have to use that pathetic excuse of, oh, I'm not good at math, I don't know how to do this, because of the way they were thought didn't resonate in their brains. And it's not just math. I think it's every discipline, especially in science or in STEM fields, can be interpreted in a much, much more user-friendly way, and that's we as professionals and leaders should be focusing on that.
Yeah. And Shayna, sorry Shayna that I didn't pronounce your name correctly. It's right there in your username. You spelled it out. It's Shayna. I said it wrong. Sorry. I said, I wish someone had said this to me in high school. And I think that is the sort of tragedy of how we've taken technology and computing and programming and made it such a remote discipline, made it feel so hard to get to that you have to go through so many hoops of math and code and logic and all these different things, which are all very valuable to know, but they aren't necessarily what we need in trying to make the democratized movement, right? Like we need people to be able to think about technology fundamentals in ways that they can actually bring holistic and integrative approaches to, and that's not going to happen if people are thinking of it as some far off, distant thing that they can never reach because they aren't good at 10 things that aren't necessary to it. So,
yeah, exactly. And look, I'm a terrible guitar player, seriously, awful. But I still play because there's enjoyment in playing, and there's enjoyment in knowing enough that you can get something back from it. And I wish we had a very easy way to do that across other disciplines, especially intellectual disciplines, especially STEM disciplines. And I think that's a worthy goal for the next generation of technology, and also why I love stuff like no code and those kinds of movements, because it removes that impulse to be a gatekeeper and to kind of go, oh, but I went to high school and college and graduate school and I've learned all this stuff and now you must suffer too. I'm like, no, that's the wrong impulse here.
Yeah. I also want to I want to use this sort of wrapping up moment of you've already got yourself into this optimistic headspace, but I want to ask you, as I think about how we think about the opportunity to build better futures with tech, and how we can stand a better chance in culture, in the corporate world, in the advertising world, or wherever, whatever scope you think is most appropriate for this question. Like, what do you think we could do to stand a better chance of creating or bringing about the best futures with tech rather than the worst futures? And you've already spoken to no code and maybe some reforms to education around technology, but what else? What kind of seems like it's going to make the biggest difference in terms of affecting people's lives?
Honestly, I think there has to be some type of whether economic incentive or similar to incentivize the development of good technologies, because nefarious technologies are very easy to monetize. And by nefarious, I do mean like literally, Dr. Evil and James Bond villains kind of thing. But when you think about how much of the development of modern day technology is tied back to, military investment and similar, like, is there a way that we can funnel those same investments and money, but have a different goal in mind for society? And I'm greatly encouraged by the approach that New Zealand has taken here, where they've identified not just the pursuit of increasing their GDP as a goal, but really measuring and quantifying and holding themselves accountable for improving society and citizens' satisfaction with the society that they live in. And that's a really, really powerful concept that I think extends beyond just technology. I think technology can't operate in a vacuum. It always has to have some connection to the people it's serving and the use cases that it's meeting. And it's the tragedy of our day is that it's easier and possibly commercially more advantageous to just develop crap.
Yeah.
I don't have strong opinions about this at all.
But so economic incentives for alignment, right? It sounds like what you're saying is the best opportunity. And I see something like this in my work too, that we need to find ways to align business incentives with human outcomes. And the more we can do that, the better chance we're going to have at scaling, great technology as well as great other business-driven experiences. So that's a great thought to close with. Hey, thank you so much for persisting with me through all of the internet connective, and thank you to our audience for persisting with us through all of the connection issues. While we've got you still here, how can people find and follow you and your work online?
So I'm the principal and co-founder of Sparrow Advisers. We're a management consultancy that helps brands, technology companies, investors, and really everybody in the general digital space work better with one another and create commercial advantages out of some of these newer technologies. So sparrowadvisors.com is our home on the internet. We have the weekly strategy newsletter that I am slightly biased, but I think it's a fascinating read because
It's good. It's really good.
It's one of those things that if we weren't developing it, I wish somebody else was doing it so that I could read it. So you can also find a link to subscribe to that on our website. And then I tweet a lot, and you can find me as AEXM on Twitter. That's my playground for testing a lot of these larger topics and ideas is there. And it's fun. So
It is
that's
fun.
me.
All right. Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone out there, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you, Anna, for being here.
Thank you.